The key question here is, does Nick Cannon regret having 12 kids? Okay. And what happens when instead of sitting with your trauma, it's repressed and it comes out through people, places, and things, and replacing the hurt inside of you with a legacy. Okay. Now, I'm Denise Brady. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I listen to this whole Breakfast Club interview. Okay. Now, there are parts of me that are like, okay, Nick Cannon is on his healing journey. You can tell he's been through therapy, but just not that he's been through therapy, he is doing the work. Okay. He is doing the work. Now, he talks about growth, maturity, his legacy, and being diagnosed with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. Okay. We're going to get to all them things. Okay. So if you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe. Now, let's get into this. What happens when instead of grown ass adults working through their stuff, they procreate? Not one, not two, but they spread out. They spread all out. The kids become the ticket to healing. The kids become the distraction to heal. And that's what happened here. Nick really never healed from his relationship with Mariah Carey. I think he regrets divorcing her. And will he openly say that? No. He can't say that because if he had never divorced Mariah, he wouldn't have these 12 kids. And if a person says, yes, I regret having 12 kids, oh, the world is already going to come at you even further. Okay. So when asked, does he regret having his 12 children? It's like, well, very diplomatic answer. Okay. I don't regret because everyone has a purpose, everything happens for a reason. He regrets it. He does. But he cannot come out and say that because it's the wrong thing to say publicly. Amongst your group chat, amongst your friends, that might be the dialogue. But every time Nick says something about being a father, co-parenting, the world comes after him. So he knows, no, I can't say that. I can't say that. Because who really wants to hear a grown man say that they regret having their children? Regret all those kids, those poor babies. Okay, those poor kids. But in reality, does this man have time to pour into 12 children? No. And we see man after man after man having kids in these broken homes. And Nick also represents they're provided for, they have good lives. But ask yourself, if you're watching this, if you had a life growing up where your parents were always saying, well, you had a roof over your head, you had shoes over your feet, you were going to tournaments, you were traveling. Yes, I had all that. But what I needed was love. What I needed was your presence. What I needed was a hug. All the things money cannot buy. So his trauma has created, in his eyes, a legacy. But I wonder about the hurt and the pain from him that not only is he pouring into those kids, but these women. And I wonder about the women too. You know, how can you sign up to be baby mama number 12? Okay. How do you recover from him forgetting your daughter's name, your kid's name? Okay. Not only that, but saying that he wouldn't want his daughters to date a man like him. Even though he is on his healing journey and he's overcome some of the stuff he has, in the past used to say and do, learning how to use his words, choose his battles, and knowing that no matter how he says it, the world is going to take bits and pieces and run with it for clickbait. But this here is a man who is trying to now, I think, figure out the mess I made. Because it is a mess. Look at this chart. Okay. Golden, powerful, rise, Zion, beautiful, halo, legendary love. It is a mess. This is a representation of my pain, my hurt, all of it. And you kind of now have to sit with well, I can't go back. I have to work through it. I have to do the work. And I think Nick is on a journey of healing. I heard a man on there who not only attends therapy, but is actually doing the work outside the room to reflect to educate himself, and I think break the stigma about Black men and mental health. But this here is a response to trauma. And instead of working through how'd I get here, I think these kids at one point in time were used as a way to cope. Having multiple kids in a rapid year after year, some multiple kids in the same year was a distraction from fully sitting with the pain of that divorce. I think it also brought validation, y'all. Kids provide unconditional love, which soothes feelings of rejection. And I think he had the world saying stuff in his ear about being married to Mariah Carey. I think there are interviews he said where he didn't feel man enough to be by her side. So I think people often have kids to validate and provide them with the love they didn't receive. And the kids at times become an accessory. And the kid becomes, oh, you're just going to fit perfectly into my life. And then when you don't, I'm going to reject you. And once again, that trauma is at the forefront. And now you're pouring your unhealed self into your legacy. Into your legacy. I think this kind of represents some external regulation instead of internal healing. Whether you're famous or a regular person, you know somebody, or it might be yourself, who has used a child or children to cope. And then what happens when that coping skill, that coping tool, who is a human being, doesn't meet its purpose anymore or doesn't meet your standards? Okay. I think he needed to sit with the divorce as a trauma. And people think of trauma mainly about, car accidents, war veterans. Trauma is a spectrum. Divorce is traumatic, not only on kids, but people in that relationship. You might see them looking happy, celebratory, having a divorce party, but deep down inside, I think there's a lot of hurt there. And most people just move on to the next thing. And in this case, it was children. Using kids to cope with what was missing inside of me, my unhealed self. And so Nick Cannon, to me, has used his children as a way to cope. But I think now he's reflecting and learning how to be better. Okay. He also talks about being diagnosed with MPD, which I think is something we need to talk about because people look at some of these personality disorders, narcissism, MPD, and they're cookie cutter. Either cookie cutter or some of y'all be acting like these armchair therapists because you were rejected. He didn't want to go on a second date with you, so he must be a narcissist. No. And the good thing about this interview is he went into detail about the test, the questions, really sitting with a professional. Now, in some ways, as a therapist, do I believe that Nick Cannon is a narcissist? The way he spoke and reflected didn't really give narcissist. It probably gave maybe some traits, but I'm unsure if he's a full-blown narcissist. But he even admits that some of the way he interacts with his kids, the children's mothers, feed his ego. Okay. Feeds his ego. I think Nick at times frames fatherhood as a sign of wealth and capability. It feeds him. Look at my legacy. Not only that, I don't know if y'all remember, but I feel like 10 years ago, Nick said that he was trying to break, was it Regis Philbin's amount of time on TV? So that's another thing. These jobs also feed his ego. Okay. His children become a showcase as an extension of himself rather than fully separate beings. Just think of it. Whenever someone finds out that one of these kids is Nick Cannon's children or many celebrities, you just get lapped into, oh, so-and-so is your mother, so-and-so is your father, and you have to live with that the rest of your life. There's really no separation, or it's difficult to separate self from whoever your parent is. And I want to know from you guys, do you think that Nick Cannon is using parenthood to maintain relevance? Does he even need that nowadays? He has so many shows, which he was promoting his show Nick at Night. Um, he always on TV doing something. But does he really need that type of relevance from a child? Admiration and media attention. Y'all, I just finished a therapy session, so I'm sorry my words are all over the place. I literally was doing therapy with somebody before this. Okay. But I think at times he overcompensates for feelings of inadequacy about that divorce. It could be another thing is that he's throwing himself into more work projects to distract himself from even his own health problems. You really don't hear much about, I think he has lupus. He to me hasn't really, calmed down and kind of laid low. He just adds more and more and more. And he says on this interview that now he's trying to his legacy be to put others in a position that he's been in. Okay. Do you guys think that the Breakfast Club often translates into a narcissistic defense? Humor, bravado, deflection. If you watch the interview, do you feel like Nick was being his authentic self? It seemed to me that out of everyone on the Breakfast Club, Charlamagne and Lauren were the most curious and very much putting the work into this interview. Low key, I think Jess has just been quiet quitting. She really don't. She really don't be doing nothing. She don't put no effort in, unless it's to promote her shows, her glasses, or anything she doing personally. She don't be doing nothing. She got a bad attitude, but that's a whole nother video. Okay, whole nother video. Okay, but I think watching this, we have to talk deeper about legacy and how legacy talk can mask deeper wounds. If I have enough kids, blah blah blah. Fill in the blank. Children become symbols rather than fully nurtured selves. And we see Cam Newton do the same thing, having all these kids from their unhealed selves. Unhealed men procreating and not really being able to be there the way each of these children need. Daughters need fathers. The first person to ever love you, show you how a man's supposed to treat you, is your father. And I wonder, what is Nick showing these kids? Okay. But I do think that he is on his healing journey, as a lot of us are. There's nobody who's perfect. He's working through it. He's admitting his faults, sitting with himself. And instead of often the media shaming him, I think we can reflect upon like unprocessed trauma and attempt to cope with the loss of identity and control. I think Nick's identity was heavily lost in his relationship with Mariah Carey. And once the relationship was over, he was able to kind of reinvent himself and get it back. But at the cost of what? At the cost of what? I think if he is really doing the work as a therapist, I think healing would require addressing his fear of abandonment and that rejection post Mariah. He still struggles to answer questions about, their divorce. Does he regret it? I think there's still a lot of deeper work, trauma work that needs to be discussed there and worked through. And I wonder, for him being so busy, what does the work look like when you have a schedule like Nick Cannon's? And let's also discuss and work on through therapy the need for external validation. What does that look like? Is he able to pour emotionally into not only these kids, but their mothers? Okay, and what does that look like? I think the whole interview just broadens the conversation about how men, especially Black men in public spaces, cope with pain, grief, and masculinity and expectations. Does the world put so much on Black men? Is there a stereotype? Is there a double standard? If this was a woman who had a bunch of kids by different men, would it be a whole different conversation? And are we putting too much pressure on Nick? Is there not enough pressure? Because at the end of the day, I think everybody just wants him to be a better father and have consistent time in each of these children's lives. But I don't really know what that looks like when you have 12 kids. So I hope as a therapist, he's doing the work. I think we need to have more nuanced conversations about narcissism and NPD, because it's not cookie cutter. It's not what they say on TikTok. It's not what your best friend said her man did to her last night makes him a narcissist. It's a lot deeper than that, y'all. Clinically, it's a lot deeper than that. Okay. But these are just my thoughts as a therapist. Of course, I want to hear from you guys. Make sure you hit that like, you subscribe, turn on all your notifications because you never want to miss one of my videos. And I'll see you next time. Bye.